This week's episodes of Amphibia are, I will say, incredibly charming. Nothing extremely important happens here, but these episodes are really good. There's a lot of great character work in them. Friend or Frobo is just 11 minutes of beautifully strange interactions between Polly and a robot that followed the planters for hundreds of miles. But I'd have to say I'm probably more interested in the other of the two episodes that were released this week. That being New Wartwood, in which Marcy tries to win over the town by making all sorts of improvements to the town. Now, if you're watching this analysis, you've probably already watched the episode, but I'll recap it briefly here anyway. The town does not like Marcy at first because she's an outsider, and Marcy does not accept this. She really wants this town to like her. Because of this, she takes her rather impressive inventing skills and tries to fix the town. She does everything from fill in potholes to build a whole new statue. And Mayor Toadstool even gets involved, manipulating Marcy's generous drive for his own selfish purposes. By the conclusion of the episode, the town starts to sink into the swamp because Marcy's improvements have disrupted the delicate balance that keeps the town stable. And because of this, Marcy goes ahead and destroys most of her improvements, and the town is mostly back to how it was before. In a way, this episode is something of an extension of the First Temple, in which we saw the negative consequences of Marcy's monomaniacal drive. She was so invested in attempting to solve the puzzles and power back up the gem that she was not conscious of the harm that she was inflicting upon her friend Anne and the planters. Now, it was not that she was being intentionally callous. She very much does care about Anne and the planters, but when Marcy sets a goal, she commits herself wholeheartedly to reaching that goal, and everything else kind of fades away. It's just background noise for her. Marcy is a big fan of video games, and indeed, she treats life like a video game. There's always one more puzzle to solve, one more challenge to overcome, and if she just figures out the right combination of moves and actions to take, then everything will magically be alright. The real world is, of course, not that simple. People are not that simple, and Marcy has quite a bit of difficulty understanding human emotion. In New Wartwood, she literally compares winning over the citizens of this town to solving a puzzle, not really considering that the emotional state of someone is not quite as logical and simplistic as a puzzle. Human relationships are strange, they're nuanced, they're subtle, they're not the same as mathematical or logical challenges. Marcy's very earnest in her desire to renovate the town, and she's honestly quite inspiring in her drive and her enthusiasm and her motivation. But she never stops to consider whether the citizens of Wartwood actually want these changes. Now, if you had asked them whether they want a better town or a worse town, they would of course say a better town. But that does not mean they will magically accept Marcy, because she wants to build a better town. When Marcy arrives in town, she carries with her her characteristic enthusiasm. She's so excited to meet the townsfolk, only to be firmly rejected because she is an outsider. Before long, she incites a mob that wants to run her out of town. Now, this is partly a joke at the expense of xenophobic small-town communities. Now, when I say xenophobia, I mean that quite literally. Xenophobia comes from xeno, strange, foreign, or alien, and phobia, meaning fear or dislike, so the fear of the different, the fear of the alien. They don't view her as one of them, they view her as an outsider who is not super respectful of their community. And to be quite frank, they're not entirely wrong about that. Marcy has a very idealistic, very romanticized view of this town at first. Now, we know Marcy, so we know that's just how she acts around everyone and everything. She's that kind of person, but if you're these townspeople, it's easy to view her as nothing more than a gawking tourist who's in love with the idea of this town, the idea of small town life, but doesn't actually care about the difficult realities of that life. Now, this of course does not justify the town's horrible behavior toward Marcy in any means, but Marcy is not initially so discouraged by the town's behavior. She believes that she can win them over if she just performs enough nice deeds for this town and for its people. And the voice of reason in this episode explains to her that life doesn't work like that. The town will accept her if she gives them time to get to know her and to understand her. Instead of just barreling through forcefully and trying to make the townsfolk like and appreciate her, she has to wait. She has to be patient. She has to give the town time to accept her on their own time and their own volition. Now, Anne does not know this because she's magically brilliant and she knows everything there is to know about small town life. No, she knows this because that's what it was like for her, personally. And at the end of the episode, she explains this to Marcy. But at first, Marcy is not at all receptive to Anne's message. She is probably the least patient person in this entire world, at least of everyone we've seen. Instead of heeding Anne's advice, she just stares up at the ceiling, very impatient, thinking of ways to convince the citizens of Wardwood to accept her. Now, in doing so, she makes quite a few mistakes. She allows herself to be exploited by the selfish mayor and his own self-aggrandizing ambitions. She installs strange clocks and shimmering fountains in the town, and she does this all without the consent of the townsfolk themselves. She herself knows that the town is already perfectly balanced on the swamp, and changing too much could cause very negative consequences, but she ignores this fact. She sets it aside because it would only serve to distract her from her mission of improving the town and trying to get them to accept her. This mission that just completely consumes her. She's just 100% dedicated to this mission and only this mission. Thus, she causes the destruction of the town and she incites the fury of the townspeople. She wanted them to love her, she wanted them to accept her, and instead, she made them hate her. Marcy knows this, and she becomes very despondent and melancholic. It's honestly quite startling. It's so different from the Marcy we typically know and love. For a second, it seems like the townsfolk are just gonna force her out, but they don't. And the episode ends on a rather thoughtful and maybe even hopeful note. The townsfolk talk about how Anne was not so different from Marcy when she first arrived at Wardwood. Anne caused a lot of trouble. She caused a lot of harm to the town. But over time, she proved herself to them. She demonstrated that she was there for them and that she considered herself a part of this community, and they accepted her. Marcy will have to endure the same process. It's not a puzzle she can solve if she's enthusiastic enough about it. There's no one cool trick that will force the citizens of Wardwood to accept her. Instead, she will have to take it slow. She will have to gradually integrate herself into the tight-knit community of this small town. Now, I really like the moderate, gradualist message here. The town's xenophobic attitudes toward Marcy are, of course, wrong, but Marcy is wrong in thinking that she can force her way past those attitudes by just doing a bunch of cool, glamorous stuff for this town. Changing people's minds is not as easy as just changing how the town looks. It's both easier and harder than that. It takes time. Marcy chases an overly simplistic solution to a complex problem. If she just lets time pass, the people of this town will gradually accept her. They're not at all monsters, the show makes that clear. They're just ordinary people, or frogs in this case. But The process to acceptance is long, and Marcy can't cheat that. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. It's a really smart, clever show. If you can't tell by how I've talked about this episode, I really like it. I want to give it all the effusive praise I can. I also really liked the robot episode. That was very strange and very wonderful. Sure, nothing very exciting happened on these episodes, and the same will probably be true for next week's episodes, but they're interesting episodes nonetheless. We get to know more about these characters, and that's absolutely a net positive for me. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon, that I can promise you. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.